Today we're going to solve difference of squares, and if you remember, going back to when we learned the FOIL method, we learned some special things about something like this, the quantity a minus b times the quantity a plus b. All we had to do was square the first, square the second, and put a minus in front. So this is what's called a difference, because it is a subtraction sign, of squares, because the first and the second are perfect squares. So it'll help if you recognize some of the numbers that are perfect squares, like 25, 64, 81. Those things will be more helpful. And don't forget, our first step of factoring is still look for a common factor. So in this case, there's nothing in factor, so ask yourself, is this a perfect square? Yes. Is this a perfect square? Yes. And it's a difference. So you know you're going to need your two sets of parentheses, square root of the first one, square root of the second one, one's a minus, and one's a plus. And it doesn't really matter if you put the minus or the plus first. So I think you get in the habit of looking at these are pretty easy to find. So again, anything in common in this? No. So is the first one a perfect square? Yes. Second one a perfect square? Yes. And it's a difference. So your two sets of parentheses, square root of the first, 2x and 2x. Square root of the second, 3y and 3y. 1 a minus, 1 a plus. So these I think most people find a little easier than what we have been doing. So first step of factoring, something in common. Is there something that goes into these? Well, yes, they have a variable in common in x, but they also have 12 in common. So we're going to factor out 12x. What would that leave us with? 4x squared minus 1. Now, can we factor that? Well, yes, it is a difference of squares. So we have our 12x. Oops, let's go back and fix that. Times, and we need our two sets of parentheses. Square root of that is 2x and 2x. Square root of 1 is 1. 1 minus 1 plus. Is there anything in common here? Yes, there is a 2 in common. So we're going to factor the 2 out, leaving us x to the 4th minus 81. Is this a difference of squares? Yes, it is. So we need our two sets of parentheses, x squared and x squared. Square root of 81 is 9, so 9 and 9. 1 minus 1 plus. Now, some people stop here, but you still need to continue to look to see if you can factor. So if you look at this, you might notice something that, yes, we have another difference of squares right here. So we are going to factor this into square root of x squared, square root of 9, 1 minus and 1 plus. Is this a difference of squares? No, because it's not a difference, so we would have to write it down like that. So make sure you factor completely, looking for everything that you can factor. So that's kind of the trick in this one. All right, is there anything in all of these? Yes, there is. Now, even if you didn't notice this, you might be able to get by with it and factor it out later on, but it's a lot nicer if you learn to do that. So everything has a 5 in common. So I'm going to factor that 5 out, leaving me x to the 3rd plus 3x minus x minus 3. Now, what do we normally do when we have 3 terms? We're going to use grouping, so I'm going to have to use my brackets here. So I think I'll just group the first two. So x to the 3rd plus 3x. And then plus negative x minus 3. Now I'm looking for something in common here. So I have an x that these two have in common, leaving me with x squared plus 3. Here, what do I have in common? I have a negative 1 because I want it to look like this over here. Did I? So if I factor a negative 1 out, oops, I should factor an x squared out of there. My fault. Messed up back here. So if I factor my negative 1 out, it's going to leave me with x plus 3. I knew I was doing something wrong because I knew what I wanted to get there. So now what do I have in common? An x plus 3, leaving me with x squared minus 1. I guess I don't need my brackets anymore necessarily. So am I done? Well, not yet. So you should notice that this is a difference of squares. So we need to always start looking for different things you can factor. So it will factor into x and x, 1 and 1, 1 minus and 1 plus. And now I'm done. So factoring completely is going to be important. So once you think you're done, ask yourself, is there anything more that you can factor?